He was not supposed to be there, and the white dog was not supposed to care. Before dawn reached the northern edge of Glacier County, Montana, the world had already gone quiet in the way it does before a storm decides what it wants to become. Snow moved sideways across an empty service road, thin at first, then thicker, whispering against the dark windows of an old ranger station that had been closed for the season. The wind carried the scent of pine sap, frozen mud, and distant smoke from cabins tucked miles away beyond the timberline. Nothing on that road moved except a single shape, pale as moonlight, cutting through the blue-black morning with its head low and its ears sharp. Blizzard, a white German Shepherd K9, walked with the patience of a soldier who had learned that danger rarely announces itself. His coat was thick, clean in places and dusted with ice in others, making him look almost unreal against the dark trees. His amber eyes scanned the ditch, the fences, the narrow shoulders of the road where snow had buried tire marks from the night before. Around his neck hung a worn leather collar with a small metal tag that clicked softly every few steps. Not a pet's tag. Not anymore. It was an old training marker, scratched at the edges, stamped with numbers almost too faded to read. Blizzard paused beside a broken mile marker and lifted his nose. Something was wrong. It was not the cold. He knew cold. It was not the wind. He had slept through worse beside men who whispered prayers into their sleeves overseas. This was a human scent, sharp with fear, threaded beneath gasoline, wet wool, and the faint metallic tang of a vehicle that had stopped too fast. Blizzard took one step forward, then another, his paws silent over the powder. Somewhere ahead, beyond a bend where cedar branches leaned heavy over the road, a weak sound slipped through the storm. Not a cry exactly. Not a word. Just breath breaking apart. Blizzard froze. His ears rose. The sound came again, nearly swallowed by the wind. He moved faster now, down the shoulder, past a torn strip of reflective tape caught on a bush, past a set of footprints already filling with snow. At the curve, the road dipped toward a shallow ravine, and there, half hidden by frost and brush, an old silver sedan sat angled against a pine stump, its hazard lights blinking faintly through the gray. One flash. Silence. Another flash. Like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Blizzard approached with caution, not panic. His training, whatever pieces of it the world had left him, lived in his muscles. He circled wide, sniffed the air, checked the back seat, checked the open door, which creaked slightly whenever the wind pushed against it. Then he saw the man. Ethan Harper lay several yards from the car, partly shielded by the slope, his dark jacket powdered white, one glove missing, his face pale beneath the rising snow. He looked to be in his early 40s, clean-shaven except for a tired line of stubble, with the kind of hands that belonged to someone who worked indoors but had carried something heavy for too long. His glasses were cracked beside him. One lens caught the flashing light and threw it back like a tiny signal. Blizzard stepped closer. Ethan's lips moved, but no sound came at first. Then a whisper broke free. "Please." Blizzard lowered his head and pressed his warm nose against the man's hand. Ethan flinched, then stilled. For one breath, the stranger and the dog looked at each other as if each had been waiting for the other without knowing it. Ethan tried to sit up and failed, his breath trembling in the cold. "Don't," he murmured, though it was unclear whether he was speaking to the dog, the storm, or something behind him in the trees. Blizzard's body changed. The softness vanished from his stance. His paws planted wide. His head turned slowly toward the ridge above the road. There was another scent now. Not one person. More than one. Nearby, but hidden. The white K9 stepped over Ethan's legs and placed himself between the man and the tree line. No growl came yet. Only stillness. That was worse. The kind of stillness that made the woods listen. Far behind them, miles away near the outskirts of the small town of Marrow Creek, Sergeant Darius Cole drove his black pickup along a plowed county road, one hand on the wheel, the other wrapped around a paper cup of coffee gone. Lukewarm. Darius was 37, a black United States Marine on medical leave, broad-shouldered, quiet-eyed, with a close-cropped haircut and a calm face that carried more weather than age. He had come back to Montana to clear out his late uncle's cabin, but the truth was, he had also come back because silence felt easier in the mountains than it did in a room full of people asking if he was okay. On the passenger seat rested a folded leash, a small bag of dog treats, and an old photograph of a white German shepherd standing beside him on a training field years ago. Blizzard had vanished 3 months earlier after a failed transport mix-up, disappearing somewhere between Idaho and the Canadian border. Darius had searched until people started using gentle voices with him. He hated gentle voices. That morning, as snow thickened against his windshield, the truck radio hissed with static, then caught a county alert about a disabled vehicle near Service Road 19. Darius almost kept driving. It was not his road, not his call. Then something moved across the edge of his memory. White fur and falling snow, amber eyes that never looked away, a dog who had once placed himself between Darius and every nightmare he could not name. Darius slowed the truck. The coffee trembled in the cup holder. He turned towards Service Road 19 without speaking. Back in the ravine, Ethan's fingers curled weakly into Blizzard's fur. "You shouldn't stay," he whispered. "They'll come back." Blizzard did not move. Snow gathered along his back. His breath steamed. His collar tag clicked once in the wind, a small sound beneath the storm, but Ethan heard it. His eyes shifted to the metal tag, and something like recognition passed across his face. Not relief. Not yet. Fear, followed by awe. "No," he breathed. "It can't be you." Above them, a branch snapped under the weight of snow. Blizzard lifted his head, his amber eyes fixed on the trees. And for the first time, low and deep, the white canine growled. Blizzard held his stance at the edge of the ravine, every muscle coiled and ready, his gaze never leaving the tree line where the first shadows of dawn stretched across the snow-covered road. "Ethan." Harper shivered, pressing his palms into the dog's fur for warmth, the cold biting through his jacket. But Blizzard did not flinch, his breathing steady, measured, a silent promise that he would not let anything happen to the man. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant earth, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Blizzard's ears twitched, catching the faintest sound of movement above the ridge, subtle enough that a human might not notice, but his instincts sharpened by years of training could read it like an open book. Ethan tried to rise, shifting on his elbows, but the snow was deep, and Blizzard nudged him gently, leaning his head against the man's shoulder, urging patience. Not far away, Sergeant Darius Cole drove carefully down the plowed road, the tires crunching over the packed snow, eyes scanning the tree line, heart pacing with a mix of apprehension and hope. He had been following the alert from the county patrol, the coordinates vague, the storm masking both sight and sound. Darius knew Blizzard, or at least he thought he did. The white K9 had been part of his own training days, a dog with a loyalty that defied reason and time. The radio in the truck crackled faintly, static filling the cabin as Darius whispered reassurances to himself, not wanting to disturb the fragile balance of what he hoped to find. Back at the ravine, Blizzard's tail shifted slightly, brushing the snow in deliberate sweeps, scanning Ethan and the approaching ridge. The man's breath fogged in the air, eyes wide, following every movement of the dog as if he could read Blizzard's every intention. A soft whistle from Blizzard broke the silence, a note low and melodic, carrying reassurance more than command. Ethan allowed himself to relax fractionally, trusting the animal more than anyone he had ever met. Then, as the first light of sun kissed the tops of the distant pines, Blizzard's body tensed, his head turning sharply toward the sound of crunching snow above. Ethan froze, heart catching, and Blizzard moved without hesitation, stepping in front of the man, stance protective but controlled, as a figure emerged slowly from the early morning haze. It was a man in a dark winter coat, carrying what looked like a satchel, pausing mid-step, confused by the dog's presence. Blizzard barked once, not harsh, but authoritative, and the man stopped, raising his hand slightly, not in threat, but in recognition that he had stumbled upon something unexpected. The snowflakes danced around them, catching the amber of Blizzard's eyes, reflecting a quiet intensity that seemed almost human in its understanding. Ethan's fingers curled around the dog's fur, feeling warmth and trust, something he had not felt in a long time. Blizzard's ears flicked back and forth as he assessed the newcomer, then turned back to Ethan, a silent question in his gaze, asking for direction, for reassurance. Ethan nodded slowly, signaling calm, and Blizzard shifted slightly, relaxing just enough to allow the man to step closer, the tension in the air palpable, yet contained by Blizzard's unwavering presence. From the ridge, Darius finally caught sight of them, heart lifting, knowing that Blizzard had held the line, that the storm, the snow, and the shadows had not broken the bond between the dog and the man he protected. Blizzard's eyes never left Ethan, his breathing slow and rhythmic, each exhale misting in the cold air, a silent heartbeat against the backdrop of wind and snow. The stranger spoke then, voice cautious, carrying over the crunch of snow, acknowledging the dog with a quiet respect. Blizzard stepped back fractionally, allowing the man closer, ears still high, alert, amber eyes scanning constantly for the smallest sign of danger. Ethan, sensing the shift, finally managed a small smile, the first human expression since the dawn had broken, a flicker of hope warming his cheeks. Blizzard lowered his head, pressing it against Ethan's chest briefly, the contact grounding them both, as the first rays of sunlight spread across the frozen landscape, glinting off the snow, turning the world a pale gold, softening the sharp edges of the morning. In that moment, the wind seemed less bitter, the snow less heavy, and even the distant trees, dark against the sky, seemed to bow in quiet acknowledgement of the bond standing strong between a man and a dog, a bond that needed no words, only trust, patience, and the unspoken understanding that Blizzard would remain unwavering as long as Ethan needed him. The first rays of sunlight cut through the frost-laden pines, scattering diamonds across the snow where Blizzard and Ethan stood. Blizzard's coat glimmered pale gold, each hair catching the light, as if the forest itself had decided to bless him. Ethan took a careful step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the soft powder, heart still hammering from the night's uncertainty, and he found strength in the steady warmth radiating from the dog. Blizzard did not move, did not glance aside, but his amber eyes softened slightly, acknowledging Ethan's courage with the quiet grace that only a trained, loyal companion could give. From the ridge above, Sergeant Darius Cole emerged carefully, eyes scanning the horizon before settling on the small group below. His boots crunched over ice and snow, each step deliberate, measured, his presence a grounding force in the otherwise ethereal, snowy expanse. Blizzard shifted position, allowing Ethan to rise fully, and the man's hands ran along the dog's thick fur, feeling the strength, the certainty, and the quiet reassurance of the animal that had held the morning together. Darius reached them, offering a nod of respect to the dog, then to Ethan, his own breath visible in the cold air, forming misty ribbons that swirled between them like a shared exhale. The white canine circled slowly, sniffing the area, ears raised, tail sweeping softly against the snow, ensuring no unseen hazard remained. Ethan watched, letting the tension ease just a fraction, realizing that for the first time since he had been stranded, safety felt tangible, anchored by Blizzard's unwavering presence. The wind carried the scent of damp pine and crisp snow, and Ethan felt a strange sense of quiet, a calm born not from the absence of danger, but from the certainty that someone, or something, was watching over him. Blizzard nudged Ethan gently toward Darius, as if guiding him back to the familiar, the secure, the steady rhythm of human care mingled with instinctive loyalty. Together, they moved toward the forest road that would take them back to the county patrol route, each step a measure of progress against the icy white landscape. Along the way, Blizzard occasionally glanced back, ensuring Ethan and Darius were keeping pace, and each glance held an almost human comprehension, a knowledge that the events of the past hours had changed something fundamental between them. The rising sun painted the snow in delicate shades of amber and rose, a soft light against the cold, stark trees, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended between what had been and what would be, holding a fragile promise of safety and renewal. Blizzard slowed, turning to inspect a cluster of footprints partially hidden beneath fresh snow, sniffing the air with purpose, and Ethan crouched beside him, tracing the pattern of the prints with his gloved hand, noting the direction they had come from, piecing together the story that the dog had led him through without words. Sergeant Cole moved behind them, keeping a careful watch over the surrounding woods, while Blizzard pressed closer to Ethan, his body a living shield, exhaling warmth into the man's cold hands. The snow whispered underfoot, trees bending slightly under the weight of frost, and the sound of distant water flowing beneath ice provided a muted melody to accompany the unspoken conversation between man and dog. Blizzard's ears flicked at the soft murmur of movement in the woods, not out of alarm, but attention, guiding Ethan and Darius safely along the narrow path that would lead them toward the main service road. Ethan's breath began to steady, his heart sinking with the calm determination radiating from Blizzard, the animal whose presence had transformed fear into careful vigilance, and every step forward felt like a reclamation of agency, a quiet victory over the helplessness of being alone. They reached a small rise where the trees thinned, revealing the frost-silvered valley beyond, and Blizzard stopped, tail low but eyes high, as if gesturing to Ethan and Darius that the most dangerous part of the morning was over. The man allowed himself a deep breath, exhaling a mixture of relief and gratitude, feeling the warmth of Blizzard's presence, the reassuring solidity of Sergeant Cole at his side, and the soft golden light of dawn spilling across the snow, illuminating the bond forged in stillness, trust, and unwavering loyalty that would carry them forward through whatever the day might hold. The road back to the county route should have felt simple, only half a mile through thinning pine and open snow, but Blizzard knew the forest had not finished speaking. He walked ahead of Ethan Harper and Sergeant Darius Cole with his nose low, reading the morning in layers no human ear could hear and no human eye could follow. The snow had softened under the pale sunlight, turning the service road into a long white ribbon bordered by cedar, fir, and the broken fence line of an old state maintenance yard. Ethan moved slowly, leaning on Darius when the slope dipped or when his legs threatened to betray him, but he said little. His eyes kept drifting to Blizzard's collar tag, to the scratched metal numbers flashing whenever the dog turned his head. Something about that tag had taken the color from Ethan's face more than the cold ever had. Darius noticed. Marines noticed silence. They noticed the kind that came from pain and the kind that came from secrets. He kept his voice low as they walked. "You know this dog." Ethan swallowed, watching Blizzard stop near a patch of disturbed snow beside the tire tracks. "I know what he was meant to find." The words hung in the cold air, fragile and unfinished. Blizzard lifted his head, as if the sound of Ethan's voice had changed the scent around them. His ears flicked once toward the west, toward the abandoned ranger station barely visible through the trees. Then he moved again, not down the easiest path, but toward a narrow cut behind the fence, where weeds and snow had covered an old access trail. Darius frowned. "Truck is the other way, boy." Blizzard looked back only once. It was not confusion in his amber eyes. It was instruction. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. "Follow him." Darius studied the stranger's face, the tired eyes, the fear held tightly beneath control, the way his hands trembled not from weather alone. "Mr. Harper, if there is something I need to know before we go deeper into these woods, now would be the time." Ethan looked toward the distant road, then toward the white dog already waiting beneath the bent branches. "I work for North Valley Children's Hospital," he said. "Records Department. 3 nights ago, I found something in the archive system. Missing donation funds. Disappearing supply shipments. Names hidden inside old invoices. I copied everything to a drive because I thought it would protect me." The wind moved through the pines with a low hush, almost like the forest itself was listening. Darius said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Ethan continued, voice barely above the snow. "Last night, I was on my way to meet a county investigator. I never made it." He touched his coat pocket, then froze. Empty. His expression broke softly, not with panic, but with the dread of a man realizing the one thing that mattered was gone. "The drive was in my glasses case." Blizzard stepped into the access trail and barked once. Not loud, not wild, certain. Darius and Ethan followed, ducking under snow-heavy branches, boots sinking into untouched powder. The trail curved behind the ranger station, where the air smelled of old wood, cold ash, and engine oil. Morning light slid across boarded windows, peeling paint, and a radio tower that no longer reached anyone. Blizzard moved to the side of the building, sniffed beneath a warped porch step, then pawed gently at a mound of snow gathered near a drainage pipe. He did not dig frantically. He uncovered with care, pushing the snow aside with his nose, then stepping back. There, half buried in ice crystals, lay Ethan's black glasses case. Ethan dropped to his knees, so quickly Darius reached out to steady him. The case was cracked, but when Ethan opened it with shaking fingers, a small blue flash drive rested inside, wrapped in a folded receipt. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The storm seemed to quiet around them. Ethan held the drive in both hands as if it were something living, something wounded that had somehow survived the night. "How did he know?" he whispered. Darius looked at Blizzard, and for a moment the Marine was no longer in Montana, but back on a training field years ago, watching a young white shepherd learn to find medicine, missing children, hidden phones, and heartbeats under rubble. Blizzard had never been just a patrol dog. He had been trained for search and recovery, for scent work so delicate it bordered on prayer. Then he had disappeared, and with him, Darius thought, a piece of purpose had disappeared too. Blizzard stepped closer to Ethan and pressed his nose against the man's wrist. Ethan closed his fingers around the drive and lowered his head. "This could save the hospital," he said. "The children waiting on those supplies. The families nobody listens to." Darius looked toward the tree line, then toward the road where help still had not arrived. His voice came calm, but firm. "Then we get it somewhere safe." Blizzard suddenly stiffened. His head turned toward the front of the ranger station. A vehicle door closed somewhere beyond the trees, muffled by distance and snow. Ethan's face tightened. Darius placed a steady hand on his shoulder, not pushing him down, not alarming him, only grounding him. Blizzard moved between them and the sound, white fur bright against the old dark wood. He did not bare teeth. He did not rush forward. He simply stood there, silent and immovable, as if the whole cold morning had narrowed to one truth. Whatever secret Ethan had carried, Blizzard had found it. And now he would guard it too. The sun climbed higher, stretching golden fingers across the snow-dusted forest floor, and Blizzard moved with quiet certainty, leading Ethan Harper and Sergeant Darius Cole toward the cleared service road. Each step was deliberate, the snow giving softly under their boots, while the trees whispered with the subtle hum of wind through ice-laden branches. Ethan clutched the small flash drive tightly in one hand, gloved fingers brushing the cold metal, and with each breath, the warm exhalations rose and dissipated into the crisp Montana air. Blizzard padded beside him, head slightly lowered, amber eyes scanning continuously, every movement a careful balance between guidance and protection. Darius kept a measured distance behind them, glancing from the trail to the forest edge, alert but composed, the trained eyes of a Marine calculating each angle, each shadow, each sound that might hint at a change in their surroundings. As they reached a bend where the forest thinned into an open field, Blizzard paused and sniffed, nostrils flaring, tail low but firm, his attention drawn to a faint scent carried on the light morning wind. Ethan stopped, following the dog's gaze, and saw the glint of a metal mailbox sticking above the snow, a marker for the cabin that had been mentioned in the county alert. Blizzard approached it slowly, pawing at the snow at its base, revealing footprints leading toward a nearby service gate. The steps were uneven, suggesting someone had hurried through, perhaps unaware of the fresh snowfall covering most tracks. Ethan knelt beside Blizzard, brushing snow off his boots, letting the dog work ahead with instinct alone. Blizzard's nose twitched as he traced the scent across the ground, leading them toward the distant hum of the main road. Darius's voice broke the silence softly. "Keep him between us, Ethan. He knows what he is doing." Ethan nodded, the weight of the morning's events pressing gently against his chest, but he drew strength from Blizzard's steady presence. The dog's movements were precise, almost fluid, each paw placement measured, as though he had performed this ritual countless times before, guiding not only them, but the rhythm of hope itself through the cold expanse. Snow swirled lightly, coating branches and brushing against their coats, while sunlight created long shadows that stretched across the frozen field. Blizzard paused again, lifting his head, listening. From the edge of the field came a soft sound, not a voice, not movement, but the quiet metallic clink of a gate swinging open somewhere beyond the frost. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He followed Blizzard's lead without hesitation, trusting that the dog's instincts were guiding them correctly. Darius stepped close to Ethan's side, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, grounding him as they moved forward, the quiet hum of the distant road growing louder with each careful step. Blizzard led them to a narrow clearing, where the early light illuminated a path of compacted snow that would take them safely to the main road. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ebb slightly, each breath mingling with the crisp morning air. Blizzard circled once, ensuring no danger lingered, and then walked alongside Ethan and Darius, tail high, eyes bright with purpose. The drive in Ethan's hand seemed to hum with possibility, and for the first time since the morning had begun, a sense of resolution brushed against the cold, sharp air. Blizzard's gaze lingered on Ethan, and the connection between man and dog deepened in that silent acknowledgement, a bond forged through instinct, trust, and shared purpose. As they emerged onto the service road, snow packed beneath their boots, the sun now high enough to burn away the last lingering frost, Blizzard slowed slightly, allowing Ethan and Darius to catch up fully, each step deliberate, each movement steady, as if the journey itself was a meditation in patience, resilience, and quiet triumph. Ethan looked down at Blizzard, brushing a gloved hand across the pale fur, feeling warmth and loyalty radiating from the dog, and in that moment, the weight of fear and uncertainty melted into the shared understanding that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, guided by instinct, courage, and the steadfast heart of a companion who had risked everything to ensure that this secret, this small piece of truth, had survived the dawn. The light shifted as they moved along the service road, casting long, fragile shadows over the snow-packed ground. Blizzard's paws pressed evenly into the white crust, leaving precise prints that marked a path of purpose and intent. Ethan Harper adjusted his gloves and breathed in deeply, tasting the crisp Montana air, carrying faint hints of pine, earth, and distant water, the kind of freshness that could sharpen the mind even in exhaustion. Sergeant Darius Cole walked just behind, steady and deliberate, scanning the horizon for any sudden movement, aware that the forest could hold more than beauty in the quiet of the morning. Blizzard stopped near a curve where the forest opened slightly, tilting his head as amber eyes caught a subtle change in the scent carried on the wind. Ethan stopped with him, letting the dog work, feeling the warmth radiate even through his thick jacket. Blizzard stepped forward cautiously, nudging a small fallen branch aside with his nose, revealing a narrow trail leading into a grove of tall cedars, snow undisturbed except for the faint traces of footprints hidden beneath the fresh powder. Ethan followed, feeling the slight tremor of his legs from exertion, yet trusting the quiet authority of the white K9 guiding them. The sun now broke more fully above the treetops, painting the snow in soft shades of gold and rose, scattering light across frost-laden branches that shimmered like glass. Blizzard moved with careful precision, pausing occasionally to sniff, ears flicking at subtle shifts in the forest air, tail low but firm, signaling caution and focus. Ethan watched every motion, understanding without words the depth of the dog's training and instinct, the way Blizzard seemed to communicate purpose and reassurance in a language unspoken but universally understood. Darius adjusted the straps on his coat and inhaled the sharp winter air, the scent of wet pine needles and distant smoke carrying faintly, anchoring him in the moment while he kept eyes and mind alert. Blizzard circled slightly, scanning the path ahead, then returned beside Ethan, pressing briefly against his side before leading them forward again, guiding with an unspoken confidence that allowed Ethan to walk with steadier steps. A faint rustling reached them from the side of the grove, soft and deliberate, not threatening but enough to alert Blizzard, who paused, lifted his head, and let out a single, clear bark that carried over the snow, signaling both attention and assessment. Ethan's fingers traced Blizzard's fur, feeling the tension in his body and the unwavering calm, and realized how completely the dog had assumed responsibility for their safe passage. They continued, moving carefully along the trail, snow crunching beneath boots, the rising sun illuminating frost-covered branches and casting pale shadows across the path. Blizzard's nose stayed low, catching every scent, reading the forest like an open page, guiding them toward the distant main road visible through the thinning trees. Ethan's heart began to calm, matching the rhythm of Blizzard's steady gait, the warmth from the dog, and the soft morning light offering reassurance that the ordeal was shifting toward safety. Darius spoke quietly, his voice blending with the sounds of the forest. Almost there, he said. Ethan nodded, drawing strength from the presence of both men and the white K9 that had led them this far with unwavering focus. Blizzard slowed as the tree line thinned, indicating the path out, eyes sweeping once more for any unnoticed disturbance, tail swaying gently, the embodiment of watchfulness and loyalty. Ethan exhaled, feeling the weight of uncertainty lift fractionally, and for the first time that morning, he sensed not just relief, but the quiet affirmation that they had moved beyond the immediate danger, guided by trust, instinct, and the steadfast companionship of a dog who had risked everything to ensure their journey continued unbroken. The sun fully illuminated the clearing now, light glinting on the snow, highlighting Blizzard's coat in soft white brilliance, and the morning seemed to settle into calm rhythm as the trio approached the edge of the main road. The distant hum of civilization mixing with the natural hush of the forest, a reminder that even in isolation, guidance and loyalty could carry them forward. The main road appeared through the trees like a promise written in gray asphalt and pale morning light, but Blizzard did not rush toward it. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, white fur lifted slightly by the wind, amber eyes fixed on the stretch of county pavement where the snowplows had left tall ridges along both shoulders. Beyond the road stood a small volunteer fire station with a flag moving gently in the cold, a gas pump covered for winter, and a row of mailboxes leaning beneath frozen caps of snow. Civilization was close enough to hear now. A truck engine somewhere. A distant dog barking from a farmhouse. The low murmur of life returning after the storm. Ethan Harper held the blue flash drive inside his closed fist, the little piece of metal, suddenly heavier than anything he had ever carried. Sergeant Darius Cole stepped beside him, watching Blizzard's posture change from guide to guardian. He does not like something, Darius said, voice calm but low. Ethan looked across the road and saw a county patrol vehicle parked near the fire station. Relief started to rise in him, then stopped. The vehicle's lights were off. No officer stood nearby. No footprints circled the driver's side. Blizzard gave one quiet whine, almost too soft to hear, and turned his head toward a blue newspaper box half buried beside the mailboxes. Darius followed the dog's gaze. Stay behind me. Ethan obeyed, not because he was afraid of the road, but because Blizzard had taught him something in the last hour. Fear was not always panic. Sometimes it was information. Blizzard crossed first, paws pressing into the icy tire tracks, moving low and silent. Darius and Ethan followed at a careful pace, the wind brushing snow crystals across their coats. At the mailbox row, Blizzard did not go toward the patrol vehicle. He went to the blue newspaper box and pushed his nose beneath its frozen lid. It rattled once. Inside, something small shifted. Darius crouched, lifted the lid with gloved fingers, and found a sealed envelope wrapped in clear plastic. On the front, written in black marker, was Ethan Harper's name. Ethan stared at it. His throat tightened. That is impossible. Darius handed it to him without a word. Ethan opened the plastic slowly, careful not to tear the paper, and pulled out a folded note. The handwriting was familiar enough to make his eyes lose focus. It is from Marlene, he whispered. Darius glanced at him. Ethan swallowed. Marlene Ortiz, pediatric supply coordinator at the hospital. She helped me find the missing records. The note was short, written with hurried strokes, but steady words. Ethan read it aloud, his voice shaking. If you reach the fire station, do not trust the first vehicle you see. Call the number on the receipt. The dog knows where the second copy is. Silence fell so completely that even the road seemed to hold its breath. Blizzard stepped closer, sniffed the envelope, then nudged Ethan's hand, where the receipt had been folded behind the note. A phone number was written on the back, along with 2 words, St. Agnes. Darius looked toward the small white church visible half a mile beyond the fire station, its steeple rising from the snow like a quiet finger pointing heavenward. That is the old church on Route 7. Ethan blinked through sudden tears. They used to store emergency supplies there during storms. The children's hospital had an agreement with them. Blizzard turned toward the church before either man moved. His collar tag clicked once, bright and sharp in the cold. Then Ethan noticed something else on the back of the receipt, beneath the phone number. A printed line from a pet transport company. 3 months old. The same month Blizzard had vanished. Ethan looked from the paper to Darius, and the truth arrived slowly, not as a shout, but as a cold wave moving through the body. "Sergeant Cole," Ethan said carefully. Blizzard was not lost by accident. Darius did not answer. His eyes stayed on the receipt. The company name was there. North Valley Contracted Transport. The same network tied to the missing medical supplies. The same paper trail Ethan had copied. The white K9 had not wandered into Ethan's path by chance. He had been part of the secret all along, moved, hidden, forgotten by people who thought a dog could not testify. Darius closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the pain was still there, but steadier now, shaped into purpose. Then we finish what he started. Blizzard crossed the road again, this time heading toward the church with the certainty of an animal following a scent older than fear. Ethan walked behind him, the drive in one hand and Marlene's note in the other, every step carrying him closer to the answer that had survived snow, silence, and betrayal. The church bell did not ring as they approached. It only swayed lightly in the tower, moved by the wind. But to Ethan, it felt as if something unseen had already begun to toll, not for judgment, not yet, but for truth finally coming home. The church loomed ahead, a small white structure standing quietly among the pines, its steeple glinting in the full morning sun that had finally melted the frost from the lower branches. Blizzard padded carefully up the snow-covered path, tail held high, ears alert, and amber eyes scanning the perimeter for any hint of disruption. Ethan Harper followed closely, breath visible in clouds that dissipated quickly in the cold air, each step bringing the man closer to understanding the thread of events that had led him here. Sergeant Darius Cole remained just behind, observing the movement of the dog and the terrain, every detail noted, every sound accounted for. The snow underfoot had become packed and uneven, with patches of ice hidden beneath soft powder, yet Blizzard's careful steps guided them safely without hesitation. The scent of old wood, winter pine, and faint traces of long-dried smoke from the church stove reached them as they neared the entrance, giving the building a timeless, quiet presence amid the bright snow. Blizzard stopped at the edge of the porch, pawing at the accumulated snow, sniffing the wooden steps as if reading a story etched into the grain. Ethan crouched beside him, feeling the warmth radiate from the dog, the same warmth that had carried him through the uncertain morning, instilling calm and focus in moments when panic might have taken hold. Darius approached more closely, scanning the surrounding trees while keeping a steady hand near the entrance, knowing that Blizzard's instincts were as reliable as any human guide, but observing nonetheless. Blizzard nudged the door slightly with his nose, and it creaked softly on its old hinges, echoing faintly in the cold air. Ethan reached out and gently pushed the door wider, revealing the inside of the church bathed in soft, golden light filtering through frosted windows. Wooden pews lined the aisle, dusted with frost from the open door, and the air carried the faint scent of wax, pine, and paper from old hymnals stacked neatly near the altar. Blizzard stepped inside first, tail low now but still alert, moving carefully across the polished floor where snowflakes had begun to melt. Ethan followed, stepping lightly, glancing around the space, noticing how quiet it was, almost reverent, as if the building itself held its breath for the moments to come. Sergeant Cole moved after him, scanning the perimeter and the small entryway, remaining alert even as the peace of the interior enveloped them. Blizzard sniffed near the altar, pawing at a loose floorboard that revealed a small compartment. Ethan's eyes widened, recognizing the shape of a second blue flash drive resting inside, secured by a folded piece of paper. He reached down, hands trembling slightly, and picked it up carefully, opening the paper to find detailed records that confirmed the missing supplies, the hidden allocations, and the path that had been traced across months of mismanagement. Ethan exhaled slowly, pressing the drive to his chest, feeling the weight not just of metal and plastic, but of the trust, effort, and risk carried in its survival. Blizzard stepped closer, head lowering so that his muzzle brushed Ethan's side, a quiet nudge that spoke of pride, patience, and unwavering loyalty. Darius finally allowed himself a small exhale, feeling the resolution settle into the air around them. The forest beyond the open door silent except for the distant rustle of snow-laden branches and the faint chirp of a bird welcoming the sun. Ethan knelt beside Blizzard, pressing a hand into the dog's fur, voice quiet, and full of emotion. "You brought me here," he whispered. Blizzard remained still, amber eyes warm, alert, yet calm, the embodiment of a guide, protector, and friend. Sunlight caught the edges of the altar, reflecting off the snowmelt puddles on the floor, bathing the trio in golden light. Each breath, each small movement was magnified by the silence of the space, the tension of the morning slowly releasing into a shared relief, a quiet understanding that the risk had not been in vain. Blizzard nudged Ethan again, this time toward the pews, and the man followed, realizing that the dog's guidance had brought him not just to safety, but to the discovery of truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Sergeant Cole placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, firm and reassuring, and the three of them stood together for a long moment, listening to the subtle settling of the church, feeling the weight of the morning lift, and knowing that Blizzard had carried them through the storm, both literal and figurative, with courage, purpose, and the steadfast heart of a companion whose loyalty had never wavered. The light in the church had softened into a pale, steady glow, filling the space with warmth that contrasted with the sharp chill of the Montana morning outside. Blizzard rested beside Ethan Harper, tail curled loosely around his paws, amber eyes attentive yet calm, as if sensing the magnitude of what had just been uncovered. Ethan's hands still clutched the flash drive, the envelope, and the folded note, each carrying the weight of truth and the quiet triumph of having survived the uncertainty of hours past. Sergeant Darius Cole stood nearby, scanning the interior for any signs of movement, though the silence was absolute, punctuated only by the subtle creak of the old wood underfoot and the faint whistle of wind through the steeple above. Blizzard lifted his head, ears flicking at the distant hum of a passing vehicle on Route 7, and then returned his attention to Ethan, pressing briefly against the man's leg with a reassuring nudge that conveyed both pride and a gentle insistence to remain grounded. Ethan exhaled slowly, eyes lifting to take in the tall windows dusted with frost, the faint rays of sun glinting across the polished floor, and he felt a sense of completeness he had not known in weeks, as if the journey, the risk, and the waiting had culminated in this single, serene moment. Blizzard shifted, moving slightly forward to inspect the folded note again, nose brushing lightly against the edge, and Ethan leaned down, following the movement, reading the words aloud to himself, letting the message settle into his mind, allowing clarity and purpose to replace fear and uncertainty. Darius moved closer, standing just behind Ethan, hand resting lightly on the man's shoulder, a quiet anchor, his own eyes softened by the morning light and the realization of what had been achieved through patience, courage, and steadfast companionship. Blizzard's coat shimmered softly in the sunlight, pale gold at the edges where the light caught the fur, and he lifted his head to glance toward the open door, as if confirming the safety of the surrounding forest, then returned once more to Ethan, reinforcing the unspoken bond that had carried them through danger, isolation, and doubt. The snow outside reflected the sun's rise, scattering light into the church, creating small dancing patterns across the walls and floor that seemed to echo the gentle movement of the dog's tail, the subtle rise and fall of Ethan's chest, and the careful breathing of Darius. Blizzard nudged Ethan again, this time toward a pew, where the man placed the envelope and flash drive carefully, sliding the note out so that it could be read fully and absorbed. The words outlined not only the mystery solved, but the path forward, the steps to restore what had been lost and ensure that truth and safety were preserved for those who needed it most. Ethan looked down at Blizzard, amber eyes meeting warm, steady eyes that had never wavered once, and a wave of gratitude filled him, a deep recognition of the loyalty, intelligence, and quiet courage that had guided him safely through the morning. Darius spoke finally, voice low and calm, echoing in the high, white space. "You have a good partner here, Ethan. One that will follow you anywhere and guide you through what cannot be seen." Ethan nodded, placing a hand on Blizzard's head, feeling the thick fur, the pulse of warmth, and the certainty of presence that had been his anchor. The church was quiet again, the wind outside moving gently through the steeple, and for a long moment, the three stood together in mutual acknowledgement, the dog, the Marine, and the man whose life had been guarded and guided with unwavering devotion. Blizzard lay down beside Ethan's feet, head resting gently on his boots, amber eyes still watchful, tail flicking slightly as though to maintain the rhythm of attention, and Ethan allowed himself to close his eyes for a single, deep breath, feeling the weight of fear and uncertainty release, replaced by calm, clarity, and a sense of grace. Outside, the sun continued to climb, illuminating the snow and the treetops beyond, a quiet testament to survival, loyalty, and the small miracles that often arrive on four paws and steadfast hearts, guiding, protecting, and revealing truths in the stillness of a morning that had begun with uncertainty and ended with the assurance that they had not been alone.